Well, hey there. If you are going to search on the internet for GLP side effects, you're going to find everything from mild nausea to this thing is going to destroy your body. And that's going to tell me a couple different things. First of all, people are scared. People are scared of what this can do. And secondly, most people have not read the actual studies. So today I want to do something pretty simple, boring in the best possible way. I want to look at actual clinical trial data on GLP-1 medication, especially semaglutide and tirzepatide, and just ask a really simple question. What side effects are common? What side effects are uncommon? And what are the side effects that are rare but are actually pretty important for you to know and to be aware of? No hype, no fear-mongering, just want to look at the data. I'm a regular guy in some ways. I don't know I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a researcher in this area, but I am a researcher. I have a PhD in theology. So my approach to this is I'm going to read into the data. I'm going to be a nerd, and I'm going to tell you what I've found and let you make some of your own decisions. None of this is medical advice, although I will tell you in some cases what it's led me to do, and you can make decisions for yourself. So first of all, when I say research, I'm mostly talking about the large randomized controlled trials. These are like the gold standard of scientific and medical research. For semaglutide, the first trials were called the STEP trials. Step 1 was published in the New England Journal of Medicine back in 2021. And then for tirzepatide, there was the SURMOUNT-1 trial, and that was published in the same journal in 2022. So these are studies that followed thousands of people over about a year. They tracked the side effects carefully. They canceled out, other kind of pre-existing conditions so they could really narrow down to say what exactly is the medicine doing as opposed to some of the other things, some of the other controls. And they compared that medication with a placebo as well. So they're really trying to dial down to what did the medicine itself do. And that matters because it helps us to be able to distinguish between what are the side effects that are caused by the drugs and what are the side effects that just sort of happen anyway. So that's kind of the approach that we want to figure out for this. Now, I want to start with the common side effects. And these are the side effects that I would say are very common. These are the ones you're going to hear about the most because they consistently show up across the studies. And most of the side effects, the common side effects, are gastrointestinal. So these are like related to your gut, digestion, and so on. In the Step 1 trial for semaglutide, nausea occurred in about 44% of participants. So this is a significant number, 44%. Half of the people are going to have some nausea. 31% experienced diarrhea, which, by the way, it's interesting. 31% experienced diarrhea and 24% experienced constipation. So it's just creating a complex issue with your gut. And about 24% experienced vomiting. So there's significant number of people that did experience these gastrointestinal issues. The SURMOUNT trial, which is for Tirzepatide, the numbers are kind of similar. In some cases, they're a little higher, but depending on the dosage. And that sounds kind of alarming if you hear these large numbers. But a couple things that are really important in that. First of all, the majority of the side effects were considered mild or moderate. So these were not overwhelming side effects for most people. Second, and this is really important, those side effects clustered around when doses were escalating. So not necessarily long-term nausea or diarrhea or constipation or vomiting, but especially right around when the dosage was escalating, and then those would normally fade. So most people feel worse when the dosage is increasing, and once their body adapts to that dosage, they're going to feel quite a bit better. And that aligns with what we know about GLP's effects, because what GLP-1 medicines are doing is slowing gastric emptying. It's slowing down your digestion. And so your gut is going to need time to adjust to the effects of that. This is not, your body is being poisoned or something like that. This is just your body adjusting to a new rhythm in its own self. So now, secondly, there's a group of side effects that cause people to stop. And I think that's important for us to know too, and especially what were the percentages, because I think that's a more honest question than just, okay, who had some nausea or who had some constipation or something, but who had the kind of effects, the level of effects that said, I can't do this anymore. And in step one for semaglutide, about 7% of participants in the study stopped taking the drug because of how bad the effects were. In Surmount 1, for Tirzepatide, the discontinuation was between 4% and 7%, depending on what their dosage level was. So over 90%, over 93% of participants are staying on the medication throughout the duration of the study of over a year. So most people, an overwhelming number, did not have the kind of side effects that would make them want to stop taking the drug. So if you're asking are you going to have these side effects? Well, probably some, but are they tolerable? Are they the kind of thing that you likely will be able to be okay? And most participants said we're able to carry through with it. Now, there are some side effects which I would say are uncommon, but they still are some real risk. And so I want to talk about those. One of the side effects that's uncommon is gallbladder disease, and especially gallstones. In step 1 trials, gallbladder-related events were slightly more common than those with the placebo. And this is really not so much related to the drugs, probably, because rapid weight loss almost always increases risk for gallstones or gallbladder issues. Regardless of how the weight loss is caused, if you lose a lot of weight, gallstones, gallbladder issues is a possibility in the study. So it's not clear how much of this is the medication and how much of this is just rapid weight loss in general. Another concern that people will ask about and does show up in the studies is pancreatitis. Pancreatitis is incredibly painful, so a lot of people are concerned about this. But large meta-analysis, so this is like across various different studies, have shown that there's not a statistically significant increase in pancreatitis for GLP-1 medications compared to placebo. There are events, and pancreatitis is really serious. It's incredibly painful for those that get it. And it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means it's rare. And there's not tons of proof to show that this is actually caused by the medicine or something like that. Now, there is a pretty serious fear that many people have related to thyroid cancer. And this one, I think is misunderstood what the data actually says. So I want to talk about that for a minute, because it's an important one. So GLP meds carry a boxed warning related to thyroid cancer, and that's based on some rodent studies where rats were given fairly high doses of these medicines, and they developed thyroid tumors. Okay, now there's a few things that matter according to the studies. First of all, humans have fewer GLP-1 receptors in their thyroid than rodents do, so that may have had some effect. Large human trials have not shown that there's an increased rate of thyroid cancer. And of course, some of these meds have been used among diabetics for a long time. And so far, there's no evidence to show that these medications are going to be causing thyroid cancer. But still, if you are someone who is at high risk for thyroid cancer, either because of medical history or personal risk or whatever, then most doctors are going to say you should not have the meds, and they are considered contraindicated. So that means they're not suggested for people who have a history of thyroid cancer. It does potentially increase the risk of thyroid cancer. So that warning is a real one, but the risk to the general population, especially if you don't have an elevated risk of thyroid cancer, it's pretty low as far as what we know now. That doesn't mean no risk, but it just means, be cautious, be careful, and especially if you have some history. Now, there's lots of really scary stories online. I don't know about you, but I'm on a number of forums that people are on these drugs, and you're going to see some really scary stories sometimes. Some are people who are being super sincere. Some are people that I think are exaggerating. And some of these, the causes are probably misattributed. If you actually look at the databases of adverse events, the reports that go on, and these adverse events reports do not indicate causation, anything, anyway. Anybody can report anything. But there are some adverse effects that people have, very serious kinds of effects, and certainly I have talked with people who have had some adverse effects. But it's important that we look at controlled trials, because they're going to tell us about how statistically likely are to have these really serious adverse effects. Fear, I think, thrives when you don't have numbers. The numbers should helpfully give us some realistic expectations about what is true. Here's the thing that I keep noticing as I read and as I am talking with people. I think we are very comfortable as a society, making moral judgments about people's bodies and what they how they treat their bodies and whether they, are living healthy or so on. But we are not very comfortable with biology itself. We don't understand biology. We don't talk about biology. We don't really lean into the biology. And GLP-1 medications are really, I think, confronting a story that a lot of us were taught, that weight is really about discipline. It's really about character. It's about your own ability to do the hard thing. And when that story gets pushed back, a lot of anxiety rushes in. And I think especially from people who were able to get healthy based on discipline alone without taking the medications, there's a big sort of moral superiority thing that takes over. And when those people begin pushing back, it's often fear that fills in the gap, where really what we want is more understanding. We want to understand what is actually the case. And so that's really where I want to kind of point in. So if we look at just summarizing what I've said in the last 13 minutes or so, gastrointestinal side effects are common. They're especially common early in the medication, and they're common when you are titrating up to higher doses. Most of those effects are mild to moderate, and they get better over time. Some people, that's not true, but the overwhelming number is going to get better fairly quickly. The serious side effects are rare, but they're not imaginary. These are very serious diseases, some of them that can be caused by or at least have relationship to incidences of uses of the drug. So we do have to pay attention to them, but they're fairly rare. And the vast majority of people, if they had any effect at all, still felt like the drug was important enough to them and helping them enough that they stayed on the trial. So there's still plenty of long-term data that we're gathering. There's a lot of information that's just going to continue to come in as more and more people take these drugs for longer and longer. And so I think we have to have a lot of humility about it. This is not going to be a miracle drug. It's going to probably have some things that are negative. I really loved one of the researchers that I was listening to who just said, hey, look, there's some negative effects of these drugs. We know some of those already, but there's also some negative effects to your health of being morbidly overweight, obese. So if we have to look at what are the negative effects of the drug and what are the next negative effects of carrying visceral fat and being obese, we know that being overweight, obese, and carrying visceral fat are bad for your health. And so it's a medication that is going to have a lot of real benefits. It's also going to have some risks, and that's most of medicine. So if you find this helpful, if you look in the comments, I'm going to have a link to the studies so you can go and read those yourself. And then next week, I'm going to continue to share my journey. You're welcome to check out some of those videos. But next week, I'm also going to address the topic of what happens when you stop taking GLP-1 medications according to the research, because a lot of people want to know about that one. So check back next week for that one. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. I share a lot of videos like this, and it helps me if you're willing to subscribe to the channel so that people find out about what we're doing. I just am going to have research-based answers as a non-expert that's reading and studying these articles. I'm going to get nerdy so that you don't have to. So like the video, click subscribe so that you can find out more.